So here on AB Talks, we have covered the topics of mental health, well-being in the workplace, and employee welfare many times before. And we've seen the conversation get louder and louder. So who better than my next guest to get into this than Chris Cummings, who is the CEO of Wellbeing at Work, who organises a series of conferences around the world on this topic. And one, later in February, is coming to the Middle East. Chris, welcome to AB Talks.
Oh, thanks for having me, Scott, and hello from a sunny UK in February, which is very unusual.
Well, it's very rare, very rare. So that's obviously going to be brightening your mood. Okay, so look, tell me, the inspiration for starting these conferences in the first place. I mean, you've been going for how many years, and when you started, you must have been, almost a lone voice in this. And how have you seen this conversation get louder?
Yeah, it's been a great journey. So back in 2014, I was inspired really by my partner's situation around anxiety and depression, and just wanted to change the conversation in the workplace. So left my corporate role and started up a forum where we could bring leaders together to really demonstrate the value of looking after your people and creating happy and healthy environments in the workplace. It was a bit of a lonely journey back then, and thankfully that conversation has really developed, and so has our series of events. So I think the last 2 years especially, everyone's been touched by whatever situation, their personal situation, and so that conversation is getting louder and louder, as you say, which is great to see, and that's really what we want to develop and continue to strive for.
Okay, so we'll get into the Middle East in a moment, but again, just tell me, how many places around the world, how many conferences are you now holding in this space?
So we do 8 annual events. So Middle East is our first one of the calendar year in February. We're in the US, Asia, Europe, Canada, Australia, UK, and South Africa. So we have strong communities in each of those regions, and hopefully this year we'll be back after 2 years of virtual only. We'll be back in person, meeting again and having those conversations and developing strategies. So it's great news.
That's going to feel good. So that to me shows me that this is a truly global issue, mental health, and it's not going anywhere. Indeed, the research I've seen says that this potentially gets worse, which means conferences like these are even more important. Is that your understanding too?
Yeah, so I think what's happened is the awareness has grown over recent years, and that continues to develop, and awareness is great. But as you say, the stats still show that this is a growing problem. So what we're looking for now, and what we're striving for, is to really encourage organizations and leaders to take action and to really develop those strategies and do something. It's not just about awareness now. We're all, we've gone through this situation together over the last 2 years on a global basis, organizations have tried to do short-term fixes, which I think was admirable. But I think now it's about making it a strategic priority and taking it as seriously as all other departments within an organization. So that's really what we're trying to get across during our summits.
Okay, well, if we talk about this being strategic, and we look at the boardrooms, we look at workplaces, what is the ROI of getting this right? I mean, what's the sales pitch? Because to me, I've seen a body of evidence that basically shows that, companies that get this right make more money. But there's a lot of factors that, that are out there that if companies don't get this right, they're really going to get punished in the next 5-10 years, aren't they?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a number of areas to look at here. First of all, and for me, the most important, I think it's the right thing to do. Why should work make us sick? And we've got to create those environments and workplaces where people thrive. They're purpose-driven. They're going to produce much better work. But there's a lot of data. If your CFO is really interested in the numbers, then Deloitte have done some fantastic reports around the cost of not doing anything, as have McKinsey. So there's some really strong reports out there from a financial point of view. And finally, you can see what's happening with this Great Resignation.
Yeah.
People have stopped, reevaluated, and really looked at the values, their own personal values, and the values of the organization that they work for. And they've said, actually, I want to do something. I want to work for someone who's going to look after me, who's going to give me purpose-driven work, who's going to create environments that really work for me. So, there's a real cost on talent drain, and those organisations who are getting this right are keeping their staff. They're attracting great talent. They're seeing reduced absenteeism. There's a huge body of work now. So the data's there if anyone needs it. But as I say, go back to my original point. It's the right thing to do. We can't have people getting sick at work.
If we come back to that business imperative, and only because we're Arabian Business, so we try and frame this in a way that perhaps those CFOs might actually listen to. They're at risk from almost two fronts, aren't they? Because if we look at the Great Resignation, we've got people of my generation. You're obviously a bit younger and more handsome than me, Chris, but they're leaving their jobs. They're now kind of sort of sick of working for toxic organizations. And then on the flip side, and I think Gary Vee, I was lucky enough to talk to Gary Vee this week, who said, bosses should be worried about the Great Resignation, but they should also be equally even more terrified of the great I'm never going to apply to your company in the first place. So you've got the Gen Zs and the millennials on one side, who you're just not going to be able to attract that talent. And then you've got your top tier senior executives who go in, no, I've discovered my purpose. I've just had 2 years in lockdown and I've spent lots of time with my kids. And I realized that this rat race is not for me anymore. So it almost feels like there's an existential reason for companies to lean into this now before it's too late, in a way.
I think the world has changed forever. And for me, the world of work is going to change so quickly over the next 12, 18 months. We've seen that shift. We've seen how we've all worked in a remote environment. And I'm not saying that's the way forward, but I think the underlying feeling within the business world has changed, and the world of work has changed forever. And those companies who don't tag on to what's going on, I think we'll see. I mean, I was chatting to someone who runs the Flourishing Project at the Stanford University in the US, and he said his prediction was, in 5 years' time, if you haven't put this in your priority list, you'll be dead as an organization, because of all of these external factors now. The Gen Z that are not even applying, the older executives, like you say, who are leaving, people really now discovering that actually there's organizations who are really doing some great stuff, and why wouldn't I want to go and work with them? So you really are going to see a massive drain of talent within your organization if you don't take this seriously.
Okay, well, let's focus on the Middle East conference. What can we expect from that conference? Who's going to be on stage? Who's coming to that conference, and what are the key messages you're going to be getting across this year?
Well, I'm delighted you'll be joining us again, Scott. So that's fantastic to have you involved in the conference again. I think just like the world of work has changed, the world of events has changed, and we've reflected that. So our format is slightly different to what we've usually done. We're bringing people together for a VIP reception on day one in person, and that will be themed leadership and strategy. So a lot of the people on the stage are CEOs of organizations, demonstrating to the audience of HR leaders why it's such an important thing, why they've done it, how they've done it. So it's really about sharing that knowledge. And then we've got some virtual content on day two to allow for people from across the region who can't travel to tune in to those sessions, and then some interactive workshops on day three. So it really is it's designed for HR leaders of organizations who want to do more in this area, but it's also designed to give you a toolbox of things to take away. It's all very well coming to a conference and listening to endless slides and walking away feeling quite lethargic. We want to have an upbeat experience. We want to provide our attendees with some great nuggets of information that they can actually implement in their organization.
Yeah, as you say, I mean, Arabian Business, we're proud to be associated with the conference this year, as we were last year. And I think also this year, if anyone's watching, any HR leaders or CEOs interested in attending, check the notes that go along with this video, because we do have a discount code that will get you some money off. And who doesn't like saving money off tickets to the conference? Yeah. The other thing that I really kind of wanted to dive into again is, why is this so hard, do you feel, for businesses and leaders to get this? Because it's imperative that we reach the leaders, because they've got to cascade this down through companies. But why is this so hard for them to accept? This feels like climate change 5 years ago.
Yeah, I think you're right, and you know, we sit here as supporters of this and really passionate about this, so it's very easy for us. I think, look, businesses have had a lot of challenges. That, you know, I run my own business. It's a challenging time to run a business, and of course, you know, you've got lots of stakeholders and shareholders to keep happy, and some of these initiatives you won't see a return in 2 weeks or 2 months or even 6 months. You know, they are longer term strategies. However, you look back at those organizations who started this 3-5 years ago, and you look at how they're performing now, the evidence is there. But it's, yes, you can do some short-term wins and see some quick reactions, but some of these things are more ingrained and more strategic and a bit more longer term. And I think sometimes that's a bit scary, because, you know, we need the results quickly. We live in a fast-paced world, so we're here to try and steer people. And even if you do something, you know, even if you just recognize as a leader this is important and you start that conversation, I think that's the journey that we're all on. So there's lots of companies doing some great stuff, and there's some fantastic results, and some of those speakers will be at the event to share their stories. But I think we've just got to, even if you haven't started yet, just start doing something, and so your employees really recognize that you take this as an important subject.
Have we reached that? Have we crossed that inflection point now, though? Because, you know, at Arabian Business, we've reported on so many pieces of research. You know, we've got Cigna research that say 88%, you know, the UAE is stressed out on one of the highest levels in the world because of a kind of always on 24-hour competitive culture. We've got Bupa research that said 96% of high net worth individuals, like the CEOs and the C-suite, are also displaying one symptom of a mental health issue. And on the flip side of that, we've got Michael Page, global recruitment company, turning around and going, 50% of applicants here in the UAE are walking through the door and going, tell me what your mental health policy is. So, I mean, and that to me feels like a real almost air sea change, even from when we were speaking, you know, about this last year. It almost feels like 2021 was a really big year for this. So have we crossed that inflection point?
I'd like to think so. Yeah, I think we're certainly on the way to, you know, as I say, the last 2 years, I think, has really shaken organizations and leadership and really put this high on the agenda. And there has been action taken, and people are doing things, but there's still a long way to go. And as I say, if we don't start this journey now, I think in 5 years' time, you'll really start to see the results. So I think, yeah, it's driven by employees, it's driven by candidates asking those questions, it's driven by the Great Resignation. These are real tangible things that are happening in the market now, not just in the UAE but around the world. And so leadership are sitting up and listening, and yeah, we just want them to do it better and do more.
You've been really generous with your time. I just want to kind of throw one more question out there for debate, which is around trust, because it's all very well companies trying to go down this path. But it seems to me that trust is absolutely vital now, because there are going to be so many organizations which perhaps haven't done things in the best way in the past. They've got to get employee buy-in as well as CEO buy-in, haven't they? Because you know, the employees are going to be distrustful. They don't want their data to be, you know, weaponized and all that sort of thing. So how do companies get started on kind of building that connection and establishing that trust with their workforces?
I think it starts at the top, and I've seen some great examples where leadership have been open and talk, at town halls and talk openly about their own feelings towards this, and that automatically makes employees feel at ease and feels that they feel as though they're working in an organisation that really cares for them. So immediately, then I think there's that trust being built. If the communication, if you're implementing something like a new app or a new initiative, and the communication is poor, then that lack of trust will be there. But if leaders can come out and say, look, this is what we're doing for you, we want to create an environment, we want to support you, and this is why we're doing it, I think that trust is built up, and we've seen some great examples of that. So it really does start at the top. And as I say, you've got town halls, you've got things like that where you can communicate to all of your teams and explain exactly what you're doing. If that communication is effective, it will go well. If it's just dropped in and said, right, we've ticked the box, people are going to be a bit.
I'm a bit like, if you remember the old Detective Columbo, because he always had just one more question. And I've just got one more question, which is actually this communication process and this benefit also goes both ways, does it not? Because if you're talking about, the C-suite, very difficult these days for leaders at the top of organizations to actually admit they're wrong or they don't know something, which creates, we've long lived with this idea of the superhuman CEO that knows all the answers. And of course, nobody knows all the answers. And that creates a great deal of anxiety, stress, and insecurity in those leaders that then gets cascaded down. And that's sort of the ingredients for toxic work cultures. So if the C-suite can be brave enough to be vulnerable in this space and brave enough to be honest in this space and go, yeah, I haven't got all the answers, and actually I understand that I'm empathetic because I'm impacted this way as well, that makes it better for them, the boss at the top as well, does it not?
Absolutely. I mean, I was talking to a C-suite CHRO a couple of weeks ago about her experiences over the pandemic, and she said, as it was unfolding, loads of employees were coming to her saying, what's the answer? What's the answer? And she said, look, there isn't a rule book for COVID. I don't have all of the answers. And she said that immediately made people feel at ease, because you can't have all of the answers. We've never been through this before. And I think, going back to that change of the world of work, emotional intelligence and transparency are going to be and are the absolute key to successful leaders. If you don't have these skills, you're not going to be a successful leader either in the new world of work. So, these are some of the things that we need to celebrate, and we need to ingrain into leadership trainings. It's not the old-fashioned way of leading companies anymore. We've got to look at a new way of working, and that those skill sets, we're seeing it in great leaders, in successful leaders. We're seeing that strong empathy and authenticity that is really showing success.
CEO, Chief Empathy Officer, huh?
Absolutely.
Totally. And if you're listening, C-suite, so there we go. We've got the future. Stop clinging on to the old world. Start leaning in and embracing the new world. And if you want to learn more about it, please, Arabian Business will be carrying lots of coverage from the conference when Chris comes to town. Chris, this is your sales pitch. Tell us the dates and tell us the website address so people can engage.
Well, that's very kind of you. I'll keep it very brief. It's the 21st to the 23rd of February. We're in Dubai in person and virtually across the region. And the website is wellbeingwork.world.
Looking forward to seeing you here in Dubai, Chris, and we will speak again very soon.
Thanks very much for having me, Scott.